Elevator Show. The internet's most inspirational podcast. Every Saturday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. African style architecture. African style architecture, the great Ma'afa, the great tragedy, the key Swahili word for great disaster or great tragedy, is a term used to refer to the centuries-long enslavement and murder of millions of Africans by white European nations, including Britain, Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the United States of America, and others. The theft of African artifacts, manuscripts, the destruction of sacred buildings, whole cities and villages, and their lasting impact on African peoples and the descendants of those who were enslaved. African style architecture, the Ma'afa, the great tragedy. The ancient port city in Eritrea, the ancient Aksumite port of Adonis in Eritrea Red Sea coast, was identified by a team of Eritrean archaeologists. The remains of numerous stone structures in a typical Aksumite style dating to the 600 AD were buried under the desert sand. Hand axes unearthed in Kenya are the oldest advanced stone tools ever found. Africans were wielding sophisticated stone tools at least 300,000 years earlier than thought. African style architecture, the Ma'afa, the great tragedy. Abydos in Egypt, the remains of a 5,000-old city, including cemetery and several houses, have been unearthed in the state of Abydos in Egypt. The remains of buildings made of mud bricks and organic materials that are now mostly decayed, along with pottery, stone tools found inside the structures. In addition, a cemetery holding at least 15 burials was found near the city. Great Zimbabwe Great Enclosure is the largest and one of the most impressive, but hundreds of mortarless stone structures dotted around the region extending hundreds of miles. The medieval capital city of the empire from 350 to 1700 AD, the name Zimbabwe in Shona is said to mean houses of stones. African style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. The dying African architectural heritage is a social-cultural emergency, as traditional architecture remains an indispensable aspect of our history, our cultural heritage, defining who we are. While some states like Mali, Sudan, and Niger Republic have done better than most in the preservation and propagation of indigenous architecture, many countries have no stated policies. This must change. African style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. Elsie Owusu, OBE, Specialist Conservation Architect, Principal of Elsie Owusu Architects, with projects in UK, Nigeria and Ghana. Founder and first chair of the Society of Black Architects. First African woman elected to the Royal Society of Arts. She's a trustee of the UK Supreme Court Art Trust. Former member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And Women for Africa Award winner in 2017. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture by Elsie Owusu. Works include Riverside View, Cardew Ackley Potteries, Master Plan for Crafts Workshops in View in Ghana, Ramp and Library Section, Guest Artist Space, Art Complex for Yinka Shonibere in Lagos, Nigeria. Swimming pool and studio second floor details in Lagos, Nigeria. UK Supreme Court Courtroom 1 design by Elsie Owusu. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. The revival of indigenous African architecture has to start with compulsory introduction of traditional architecture into architectural school curriculums, its history, design theory and construction methodology. New works by contemporary African architects such as Elsie Owusu and designers have demonstrated the vast potential of traditional African architecture when combined with modern designs, materials and construction techniques. The Motivator Show. Success is ours for the taking. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. Press the like button and don't forget to leave a comment. Follow us on Facebook. Give us the thumbs up and share with your family and friends. We are also on Instagram and TikTok. Follow us there too. You can listen to us on galaxyafui.net and also Mixcloud too. The Motivator Show. The internet's most inspirational podcast. Every Saturday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. African-style architecture. African-style architecture, the Great Ma'asra, the Great Tragedy, the key Swahili word for great disaster or great tragedy, is a term used to refer to the centuries-long enslavement and murder of millions of Africans by white European nations, including Britain, Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the United States of America, and others. The theft of African artifacts, manuscripts, the destruction of sacred buildings, whole cities and villages, and their lasting impact on African peoples and the descendants of those who were enslaved. African-style architecture, the Ma'afa, the Great Tragedy. The ancient port city in Eritrea, the ancient Asumite port of Adonis in Eritrea Red Sea coast, was identified by a team of Eritrean archaeologists. The remains of numerous stone structures in a typical Asumite style dating to the 600 AD were buried under the desert stand. Hand axes unearthed in Kenya are the oldest advanced stone tools ever found. Africans were wielding sophisticated stone tools at least 300,000 years earlier than thought. African-style architecture, the Ma'afa, the Great Tragedy. Owusu in Egypt, the remains of a 5,000-old city, including cemetery and several houses, have been unearthed in the state of Abydos in Egypt. The remains of buildings made of mud bricks and organic materials that are now mostly decayed, along with pottery, stone tools found inside the structures. In addition, a cemetery holding at least 15 burials was found near the city. Great Zimbabwe, Great Enclosure, is the largest and one of the most impressive, but hundreds of mortarless stone structures dotted around the region extending hundreds of miles. The medieval capital city of the empire from 350 to 1700 AD, the name Zimbabwe in Shona is said to mean houses of stones. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. The dying African architectural heritage is a social-cultural emergency, as traditional architecture remains an indispensable aspect of our history, our cultural heritage, defining who we are. While some states like Mali, Sudan, and Niger Republic have done better than most in the preservation and propagation of indigenous architecture, many countries have no stated policies. This must change. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. Elsie Owusu, OBE, Specialist Conservation Architect, Principal of Elsie Owusu Architects, was with projects in UK, Nigeria and Ghana. Founder and first chair of the Society of Black Architects. First African woman elected to the Royal Society of Arts. She's a trustee of the UK Supreme Court Art Trust. Former member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And Women for Africa Award winner in 2017. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture by Elsie Owusu. Works include Riverside View, Cardew Ackley Potteries, Master Plan for Crafts Workshops in View in Ghana, Ramp and Library Section, Guest Artist Space, Art Complex for Yinka Shonibere in Lagos, Nigeria. Swimming pool and studio second floor details in Lagos, Nigeria. UK Supreme Court Courtroom 1 design by Elsie Owusu. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. The revival of indigenous African architecture has to start with compulsory introduction of traditional architecture into architectural school curriculums, its history, design theory, and construction methodology. New works by contemporary African architects such as Elsie Owusu and designers have demonstrated the vast potential of traditional African architecture when combined with modern designs, materials, and construction techniques. The Motivator Show. Success is ours for the taking. Indeed, success is ours for the taking. How are you feeling, people? How are you feeling? This is the Motivator. This is where we translate our words into action. And where success is ours for the taking. How are you feeling? Because I'm feeling fantastic. I don't know how you're feeling. I'm feeling outstanding. It's Saturday morning and it's the Motivator Show where we are going to inform. We're going to empower. And you know what? We're going to move your feet. Intellectually, you're going to be stimulated. You're at the end of it going to feel that, look, I've just had a big meal. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So, how are you feeling? I hope you're feeling good. Because this time, not only do I have a wonderful guest coming along later on who will be truly enthralling, this will be an intellectually stimulating show, one that will move you to action, because action speaks louder than words. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm going to go right into the show this week, because I believe that we can make the difference. So, first of all, thank you for being here. I know what it's like. I know what it feels like when you say, oh, it's Saturday morning. Oh, yeah, it's the Motivated Show. That should be your stimulus, if you like. And it is your stimulus, so we appreciate you. And those of you who are watching the recordings, that's fair. I hope you had a exercise before you're watching the show. But now we begin. This show, as you many of you be aware, goes out on various platforms. So first of all, I want to give appreciation to the management of galaxyafui.net. In fact, let's bring up the links to the various platforms that we're on this morning. There we go. I want to give light to galaxyafui.net, a digital radio station, which is the foundation for this show. Okay. I want to give appreciation, of course, to Nana Pakambapai, the founder and visionary leader of galaxyafui.net. Okay? Let's give appreciation to them. Let's give appreciation to him and, of course, to Galaxy members. Oh, I've got someone on the line already. I've not opened the phone line. I'm echoing. Thank you very much. I'll turn it down. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Now, let's take care of the echoing as we move on. There we go. I'll take it down now. There you are. That should be much better. Also, of course, this show goes out via YouTube. Those of you watching us on YouTube under Galaxy, forgive me, The Motivator Show. It's very clear. The Motivator Show. We're also going out on the Motivator Show banner on Facebook. And of course on Mixcloud too. You can see on the screen. An excerpt will go out via Instagram and TikTok. So be ready for us. That's where you can see us. That's where you can see us. Okay. Let's turn down the volume a little bit for you. Now, so that is us. We will extend the platforms, that we are going out on. But those are the current platforms that the Motivator Show goes far and wide, goes far and wide. If in doubt, I say to people, if in doubt, just send us a message. We're also going out live via the usual chat facility on YouTube and Facebook. Yep, so you can find us there as well. You can find us there as well. So be aware that you can find us on YouTube and Facebook. Now then, so if you wish to talk to us directly throughout the show on your YouTube or Facebook, the chat facility is open now and you can communicate directly with the studio. Okay, you can communicate directly with the studio. There we go. Let me just adjust that for you. So there you are on screen. Now let me now take over to my live screen and let me just say a few other words for you. Words of encouragement for those who've been party to the show on previous occasions. It is so important that the guests who I bring along to these shows are inspirational, that they are able to offer a real contribution to the life and times of who we are as a people. Okay. Thank you. I've got that. Please, I've got that. Thank you. Life and times of our peoples. Life and times of our peoples. And what's really important, particularly as we now move forward, is that not only do we think about those who are our neighbours, those who inspire us, I want to be introduced to whoever you find inspirational, okay? Because such people, I am sure, have a real message to share with the wider population. And for that reason alone, I want to talk to them. Introduce them to me. You have the chat facility, send the message through to the studio. Love to know who you believe I should interview next. There you are. Okay. Now, let me also just say a few other words. Many of you be aware that as we progress these shows, one of our clear intentions is, of course, to ensure that you gain something out of this, And that is why we each Saturday, we have a lifestyle section. And we know from the feedback we've received that there is significant benefit. We know that lives have been saved. We know that health has been regained. And I want you, please, to spread the words. Our lifestyle messages are simple messages, simple changes you can make to your life and make the difference. If in doubt, I say to you, if in doubt, please do not hesitate. Respond, react to the wise words you're hearing today. And I hope those messages find you well. Yes, it's the Motivator Show. This is where we translate our words into action and where success is ours for the taking. Be in no doubt. You can all make the difference. You can all make the difference. But before I get into the lifestyle messages, I just want to give a big thumbs up for the contributors that we had on our last podcast, okay? And I think many of you be aware, forgive me, I think many of you would agree, better word, many of you would agree that our discussion last week on that most important of countries, and not to say other countries not important, of Nigeria, and the issues which are affecting Nigeria, is one that we must pay close attention to. And I wish all Nigerians well. I realise there's some trials and tribulations underway right now, But I hope that all the parties in Nigeria can find peace amongst themselves so you can create prosperity for all Nigerians. Whatever configuration of Nigeria that you feel will provide the peace that you need so you can create mutual prosperity for all, I hope you get to that point as quickly as possible. Okay? So I'm going to give a big thumbs up to all Nigerians. I mean, there you are. Not to suggest others are not important. There you are, the thumbs up. But it's an important country. The trials and tribulations it's going through right now. We must help all Nigerians to find that peace. And that peace isn't simply accepting the current status quo. It is highly likely that peace will happen because change, appropriate change, has occurred. That's what I want to say. But a big thumbs up to all Nigerians. In fact, let me do the double. I'm going to do the double. You see the fireworks coming out of my head. Yeah. To all Nigerians, let's hope very soon you will find peace so you can create prosperity for all. I know you understand when I say that. Peace so we can create prosperity for all. Oh yeah, very, very important. We must help all Nigerians to find that peace, to reconcile the differences, to reconfigure the country as is appropriate, so peace can be found, so prosperity can be generated for all. All right. Enough of that. I now want to go forward. Go forward. I want to go forward. It's now time for the lifestyle messages, all important lifestyle messages. The messages, the evidence I have suggests that thousands, tens of thousands of you have responded to, and it has made a difference to your general health and well-being. So these are not proclamations, these are not instructions. These are decisions you must take for yourself. Okay? You take responsibility because it is your health. So I'm going to begin and listen keenly. I say to each one of you, listen keenly because these messages are designed for you. And it's very simple, but it does require and will require action from you. So my first message, I ask you to consider the amount of sugar and salt that you consume each day. Yep, that's it. Sugar and salt. Sugar is one of those ingredients we actually add to our foods. Yeah, and it does create a sense of euphoria, happiness. Many of you who are addicted to sugar, and I was addicted to sugar as a child because I was introduced to it as a child. And as many of you who are more biologically trained will understand, sugar and the chemicals of sugar, it's very similar to the hormones in our bodies, and therefore it has potential addictive qualities to it. Consequence of that is that many of us become addicted to sugar and we over consume. We eat too much, consume far too much sugar. With a consequence, it can have long-term implications. Many people here will be aware that, particularly within the African and Asian communities, the levels of diabetes is off the scale, off the scale, off the scale. Here in Britain, the National Health Service spends more than £25 billion a year treating people with diabetes. Yeah, the diabetes, and these are ultimately self-inflicted conditions. Type 2 diabetes is very much a lifestyle condition. Yeah, our body's been overwhelmed. Indeed, our pancreas has been overwhelmed, and its inability to secrete appropriate amount of insulin to break down the sugar that we consume is the root cause of the diabetes. But that's because we overconsume. I ask you to consider the amount of sugar that you consume each day. And if in doubt, please go to your doctor. Please go to your doctor and get your blood test to test the amount of sugar you have in your blood. And that will give you a good indication of what you need to do. And similarly, I ask you to consider the amount of salt that you consume each day. Again, salt is one of those ingredients in our food that you don't actually realize often how much is actually there. But we develop habits, particularly as youngsters, where we add far too much salt and we eat too much over periods of time. Just like sugar, if you're consuming this particular ingredient every day, every week, every month, every year, every decade, okay, and you're over consuming on salt, it has an impact on our bodies, particularly when it comes to hardening of the arteries. And later on, I'll come on to that. But I ask you to consider the amount of sugar and salt that you consume. Gradual reduction. I no longer purchase sugar from the grocery stores, and I most certainly add only very minute amount of salt where I think it's necessary to my food. Otherwise, I do not add salt to my food, and particularly for those of us in the sort of the Western world, as it were, in Britain, Caribbean, Europe, and Americas. The levels of sugar and salt in our diet is tremendous. It is tremendous. The other ingredient I want to bring to your attention is carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates, it's one of those ingredients which you don't realize quite how much is actually there. And that's the terrifying fact. There you go. Carbohydrates, primarily in our case, is derived from wheat or root produce such as potatoes and the yam. Okay? And of course, eating it every day, yes, it has benefits. Of course, it's a source of nutrients and energy. Of course, it is the overconsumption which is the challenge. And of course, you see on the screen examples of potatoes and the yam. And I have to say, particularly us from Africa, West Africa in particular, but even the Caribbean and Americas, the overconsumption of the yams is the challenge. Yeah, I know. It's the overconsumption. We're told by the experts for each sitting we need no more than a fistful of food per sitting. Yeah, I know. It's terrifying, huh? But and like you, I'm sure, been used to eating far more than a fistful of food per sitting. Yeah, just like you, I have traditionally overeaten. It is a problem because the access to nutrients is so readily available here, particularly in the West. Other ingredients I want to give light to is fat. You see on the screen examples of fat. Yep, it is raw meat, and you can see the meat, which is red. You can see the fat, which is clearly the white streaks in the meat. That is simply fat, simply fat. And therein lies the biggest problem that we all have, that the presence of fat in our diet is causing real damage to our general health and well-being. It is causing real damage. So I urge you to consider the amount of fat that you consume each day. And I just got to say, before I move from this screen, dairy products are simply fat. Yep, it's simply fat. It is simply fat. So please, I urge you all to consider very carefully the amount of fat that you are consuming each day. I simply ask you to do so. And I'm going to move on to the next screen and the next screen. And I'm just adjusting my volume. For those of you complaining on the Galaxy section that it's loud, I'm making an adjustment to my volume right now. One of the consequences of the overconsumption of the sugar, salt, carbohydrates, and fat, that the residue ends up in our arteries and our veins. Okay. And here you see on screen an example of that impact. You could see a blood vessel partially blocked, and that blockage is primarily the food that we have eaten, the food that we have eaten. And the consequence of that is that you see a partial blockage, and our blood is having to force its way, being forced via the blockage. And that blockage, of course, means that the heart has to beat with even greater vigor or higher pressure, and therein lies the problem. Hypertension in our community is extremely high, in high numbers. Gosh, there you go. Yeah. And why is it? It is directly related to our lifestyles. Our lifestyles promotes the overconsumption of the ingredients I've just mentioned and can potentially lead to blockages in our veins and our arteries. And there's a strong causal link. The heightened blood pressure is a big problem in our community because many of you with high blood pressure will recognize the dangers to your general health and well-being. And you're asked to take blood thinners and other chemicals in order to regulate your blood pressure. But we all can avoid it by making steady changes to our lifestyle to avoid hypertension or high blood pressure. I simply ask you to consider the amount of sugar, salt, carbohydrates, yeah, that you have in your diet. And the last ingredient is, of course, starch. Starch is one of those ingredients that we don't consciously add to our diet, but its presence in the foods that we consume. One of the principal sources of starch, particularly from the African communities in particular, is rice. It is the overconsumption of rice which is the challenge. And it is truly challenging because it's the habit we've developed as part of our cuisine. And I get it, I get it, I get it, I get it, okay? But unless we regulate the amount of of uh, uh, starch that we consume, it has that direct causal link to our general health and well-being. And on the screen, you can see those pretty foods we'd love to give to children, particularly. See those cakes? Yeah, it's full of sugar, salt, carbohydrates, fat, and starch. And yeah, we are doing our children a disservice. We are indeed doing our children a disservice. So I simply ask you to consider the amount of starch that you consume each day. And I am assuring you, you'll be better off once you carefully regulate the amount of starch that you consume. The impact, of course, of our general diet is, of course, what you now see on the screen. You can see a lady and a gentleman with the bloated shoulders, the bloated chest, the bloated abdomens, bellies if you like, and the bloated bottoms and thighs. Yeah? This is the impact, the direct causal impact of our lifestyle, what we eat, and the impact it has on our body. And in our communities, overweightness or obesity is at a dangerous level and is having a general impact on the overall community's health and well-being. I urge you to hear these messages. Could many of you be aware that I am an elected official? I see the official figures. I can see the direct causal link and impact, therefore, it has on our community. The experts recommend that we consume far more natural, untainted fruits and vegetables. You see on the screen wonderful, untainted fruits and vegetables. tomatoes, you see the melons, you see the noriega, you see the cherries, you see the pumpkin seed, yeah, you see the beetroots, yeah, you see the wonderful avocados, yeah, you see the oranges, the cabbages, yeah, you see the cauliflower, the sweet corn, yeah. This is what our bodies crave. With this food, our bodies can regenerate itself again and again and again. Give your body what it needs to survive. You see the mushrooms, yeah? You see the carrots. That is what our bodies require. You see the pineapple. You see the oranges, yeah? You see the lettuce. That's what our bodies crave. See the bananas. See the cucumber. That is what our bodies crave. With this food, our bodies can regenerate, renew itself again and again and again. Because this is the food for life. See the lovely lemons there, yeah? That is what our bodies require. And of course, many of you be aware that we are more than 70% water. And of course, you see the young man and woman on the screen topping up on their water. 70% water means on average we need between 2 to 3 litres of water per day. Don't overconsume on the water, but it's important to ensure that you are appropriately hydrated. I urge you to hear this message. It's important to drink appropriate amount of water each day. But most importantly, if you've heard the earlier messages, you would then understand that as human beings, our bodies must be exercised. Sitting down and sedentary, doing very little exercise is extremely harmful. You may as well eat dangerous foods every day if you're not exercising. Exercising is life. You see on the screen, young lady pumping her weights. You see the mature gentleman with his headphones in and he's running with a smile on his face. He knows this is important for him. See the young lady running up and down those stairs. Yeah? I can assure you that is exercise. You see the young man doing his press ups up and down for at least 20 to 30 minutes per day will make all the difference to your general health and well-being. I urge you to hear these messages. Exercise is important. Please do not hear these messages with regards to food and not exercise at the same time. And lastly, as human beings, we are truly spiritual beings, spiritual people. It's important to take care of your mental and spiritual health. It is important to take care of your mental and spiritual health. So I urge you, if in doubt as regards your mental health, please seek out professional advice or speak to whoever you most trust and ask for support from that person. I trust that person will care about you enough to ensure you receive the professional guidance, the professional treatment that you may need. But ultimately, we are, of course, spiritual beings. It is so important to take care of your spiritual health. Speak to your spiritual advisor and ensure you are in good spiritual health. I rest with those messages, and I hope those messages see and feel you well. It's important to share these messages with your family, your friends, your network, your associates. Yeah, it is so important to keep the entire human race healthy. I hope that message is clear. And what I'm overruled by is the impact these messages have had. Okay, and what I encourage you is you can exercise, you can do all this by yourself, but I encourage you to work with others, either members of your family, your friends group, your networks, come together in common aim and common purpose. And in doing so, I'm confident you can and you will make a difference. I want to give an example of a group, particularly of Africans in this case, who've come together in common aim and common purpose, yeah? From right across the continent, from Nigeria to Ghana, from Tanzania to Somalia, and from Sudan right across to Cabinda, come together in common aim and common purpose. I want to commend to you the countdown organizations or just diverse group of people who've understood working together to promote general health and well-being It's in their common interest. So listen to this. Watch them at work, the Countdown organization. There you go.
Cheese. Famous. Hello, 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 hello. Awe. 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 You get one life on leave, me self get one life on leave. Why we no go use am gladdy and enjoy the time? Palava no dey finish, time me no dey wait nobody. Now why I dey try for always get am nice every day and night? This one way we all friend we safe, not nobody own. You want to eat with you much we go down you belly now you young. And the balance where you go die left na all the money on. So why for the pity you say for? Tell the motor car where you let buy am. If you see finance where you call it bilam. Oh. You meet up woman where you let yanam. And if you let the man na for keep am. Want them more. The food where you feel for eat na for eat am. That fine la power where you let na for buy am. And tire more. And if you baby love you back love am. But if you love them all now you not for left am. Want them more. Cause nobody know waiting tomorrow all. So every day of my life tear all. I fasting enjoyment stay go. Now for land for care for yourself. Nobody love you pass yourself. All man they fed for himself. Oh. Now why I know they allowed with you other man they pan take me peace away. Me joy away, me smile away, oh no make nobody take your peace away, me joy away, me smile away, oh no, alright. Every day, I see they also they work for the pay. They like na boku on a small you the cage. Land for the loose body 110. No to money, no to gently. No more they make motor man and brother. As long as you get waiting, you they eat. Land for the loose body 110. This one way we all friend we safe, not nobody own. You want to eat with you much we go down you belly now you young. And the balance where you go die left na all the money on. So why for the pity you say for? Now the motor car where you let buy am. If you see finance where you call it bilam. Oh. You meet up woman where you let yanam. And if you let the man na for keep am. Want them more. The food where you feel for eat na for eat am. That fine la power where you let na for buy am. And tire more. And if you baby love you back love am. But if you love them all now you not for left am. Want them more. Cause nobody know waiting tomorrow all. So every day of my life tear all. I fasting enjoyment stay go. Now for land for care for yourself. Nobody love you pass yourself. All man they fed for himself. Oh. Now why I know they allowed with you other man they pan take me peace away. Me joy away. Me smile away. Oh no make nobody take your peace away. Me joy away. Me smile away. Oh no
Oh yeah. Isn't that an example of, isn't that fantastic? Oh my gosh, isn't that fantastic? Now, I understand that there is a slight problem on the Galaxy F3 channel. I'm trying to resolve that right now, and I will resolve it in a few moments. I'll just give you a few moments. I will resolve it. But it's important. Take care of your health and well-being. And if in doubt, seek out professional advice. I say again, if in doubt, seek out professional advice. So what I want to do before I go to my main theme for today's show is really give light to a few issues which, as you know, I regularly give light to. First of all, I want to give light, of course, and I mentioned earlier on, to the situation in Nigeria. And of course, my previous guest, that's of course Ndidi Owusu. She, of course, exemplified the strengths of Nigerians, yeah, and of course has articulately put forward solutions to Nigeria's current problems. Okay, and in doing so, of course, she has brought home to us the importance of collaborative working. And in her case, what she has looked at is the NINAS organization. I put it on the screen as an organization able to find peace and prosperity for all Nigerians. Okay. So if you wish to be a part of that great change in that great country of Nigeria, I commend to you NINAS. You can contact them via their website, which is www.ninasvoice, NINASVOICE.org, okay? Or you can email them at info@ninasvoice.org, or you can telephone them directly, international code plus 234 912 1551. This is an organization that transcends all the tribal, cultural, and sectional differences within Nigeria, but seeks to achieve peace. You can achieve prosperity for all Nigerians. I commend the NINAS organization to you. I also, of course, want to give light to the ongoing issue of Windrush here in the UK. It's an issue that is not going away. The new government, we hope, will find solutions. And you've had a number of my contributors in the past, particularly Anthony Brown, who's recommended that the government enact a Windrush Act. So there's an innate right for those who are affected by the Windrush scandal. And it is a scandal because it was a situation in which the citizenship was taken away from people. Yeah, was taken away from people. Yeah. So it's so important. It is so important, therefore. It's so important. Let me get this right. It is so important that what happens is that we provide support to those who need our support. So the Windrush Legal Advice Clinic, based in West Midlands, 58 Bank Street, West Midlands, WV148PD, is such an organisation. You can phone them directly on 01902 382 542. It is really important, if you are affected by Windrush, that you do not sit there. You do not simply suffer in silence. I urge you to seek out support. I urge you to seek out support. The other organisation I want to give light to, and of course many of you will recognise this one, and why, in fact, let me do the other one. There we go, the other one. Why I say this. You know, many of you will recognise that I'm very much concerned with the development of young people, yeah? Or us adults should ensure the next generation has an easier path. Whole purpose of us being here is to create a better world for those who come immediately after us. I wish to commend to you the National Association of Black Supplementary School, set up as an umbrella to record where our supplementary schools, our cultural centres, our support facilities, particularly for those from 0 to 30, can be found. Okay, it's a website set up voluntarily by the inspired Brother Near. I commend to you the National Association of Black Supplementary Schools. The website address, it's www.nabss.org.uk. Yeah, www.nabss.org.uk, or you can send an email at info@nabss.org.uk, or phone the inspired Brother Near on 027 958 348 558, and he will either record, if you run one of those facilities, ensure your details of your facility is on the website, or indeed if you're a parent or a guardian or just a concerned adult, he will direct you to where the nearest facility can be found. These are usually wholly funded by the community for the community. I'm immensely proud of those of you who are involved in providing supplementary school, educational, cultural facilities, particularly for the young. It is so important as a community. We are used to supporting the young. Indeed, my guest, I can assure you, definitely supports the young, ensures that they have a path to success. There you are. Because the trials and tribulations of life is such, it is unbelievable what we all have to go through to gain our positions, and not only gain the positions, he says, to retain our positions. We understand the trials and tribulations of life. Okay. And I've described to you, therefore, are organizations who are involved in reparations for all intents and purposes, because reparations begins with self. You note in my intro video, I noted, of course, the absolute disaster, the great tragedy, yeah, or indeed the Ma'afa, what it has meant for particularly African peoples over what, 4, 5, 600-year period, the destruction of our homes, our villages and cities, which has resulted right across the continent, a notable absence of ancient cities. What you see are the absolute relics. So it's possible to develop in your own mind that, oh, maybe we hadn't built anything. But actually, all the fossils tell us that there are great cities that go back thousands of years that are built by African ancestors. You note in my intro video, I note that many of our manuscripts, our great works, are still to this day held in the museums, both public museums like the British museums and private museums, or particularly of those who were part of those enslaver families. Private collections of our treasures, our artifacts, our manuscripts, our knowledge base, our identities. It is estimated more than 98% of our past achievements, those manuscripts, those records of our achievements, are kept outside the continent right now. So it's easy for many Africans, even highly intelligent Africans, almost infer that they were never there. Amnesia, in other words, yeah. It is so important that such notions are dispelled. You cannot have a situation which you see a civilization which has existed for over 100,000 years, but yet not have accompanying manuscripts and artifacts. There you are. Just think about it. Just think about it. And you ask the question, and I may even put this question to my guest. Why won't the British Museum open up its vaults so you can see what was taken from Africa? Oh, yeah. I want you to think about that. I just want you to think about that. Why won't the British Museum do this? Why won't those in France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium do so? And why did it take one of the other European nations, such as the Russians, to declare that the Madonna that they hold in their vaults look like an African woman, and may look like the African woman who I'll bring into my studio in a few moments? Why is that a fact? Okay. The whole purpose of these shows is both to inform and to stimulate intellectual thoughts and actions. Yeah? The whole purpose of these shows is to provide a firm basis upon which you, the audience, can reconnect with your history, your proud past. Okay? And our creative past is quite remarkable. So what I want to do now, I'm going to bring in my guest, and I just hope that I can bring in my guest without any technical problems, of course, it'd be nice. And you'll find this guest just like the African woman I had on the last show, be truly inspirational. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's see if I can make this happen without any further ado. Oh, it worked. Oh, good morning. You're slightly off center. Oh, yeah, that's right. Keep going a bit further along. No, there you are. Now you're centered. Now you're centered. Good morning, Elsie. How are you?
Hello,
How are you?
hi, hello,
Oh, we can't hear you. Say again.
hello. Can you hear me?
Ah, right. Good. Okay. Let me just turn up
Can you
your
hear me now?
volume. Is that my end? Okay. Keep talking. And how
Okay,
are you
all
feeling
right.
today?
It looks to me as if you can hear me, but I'm not
Okay.
entirely
One
sure.
second. I've got a slight problem. We're not hearing you as well as we should. Let's see.
Is
That's
that better?
you are present, but not quite as loud as I would like. Okay. Say again.
Hello,
Uh-huh.
hi,
Yeah,
hi.
we can hear you.
I'm
Just a
Rosalind.
little
Can you hear me?
faint for some reason. I will make an adjustment to my system, and let's keep talking. I'm going to go off
Okay.
screen. I'm going to make an
I hope
adjustment
it's
to my
not.
volume
I
for a
hope it's not.
second.
I hope it's not at my end.
Yeah, no, I don't believe it's your end. I know what to do. First of all, I know you, Elsie. I know you, and it is a great pleasure. And thank you for agreeing to interview this morning. Can I just ask you just to introduce yourself and just spend a few minutes describing your journey? Just a few minutes, nothing in detail for the moment, but just a little. Let's give them a flavour of who you are as a person. Hmm.
Okay. All right. Well,
We'll get a
my
start.
name's Elsie Owusu.
Mhm,
I'm Ghanaian by birth, British by nationality. I am an architect, and I have worked on various projects, and I'm working on various projects in UK, Nigeria, and Ghana.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
I have an extensive portfolio in transport, infrastructure, master planning, and architecture. And the buildings that people might know that I've worked on include the Supreme Court in central London, in Parliament Square, and London's Green Park Station.
mhm, mhm,
So those are two buildings. But I've worked on lots of small homes, refurbishments in London, various parts of London. Um, when from being a student, starting with voluntary work as a student,
mhm,
and then being a salaried member of the housing association team in Solon South East Housing Association in Peckham,
mhm.
which is where I started my career after leaving architecture school.
Okay, hold on there. Don't give us too much away. Don't give too much away just yet.
Right.
And it is fascinating as I did the research on yourself. It is fascinating. Um, I think go right back to the beginning. You may have heard my introduction, and I had to note that right across Africa, it does appear that the levels of destruction it only becomes apparent when you compare the fossil evidence with the evidence above ground, as it were. Okay, and understanding the impact of colonization across the continent. I just want to start from this point. I was struck as part of my preparation for this show. A young person suggested that Africa never had cities. How would you have responded to such a question? And keep talking. I'm going to move. I'm going to leave my seat. But I just want you, just for benefit of parents and others, how would you respond to that young, precocious mind who's simply looking at the evidence? Where are the ancient cities across the continent? Yeah, yeah. How would you have responded?
Well, I think it's quite a shocking thing for a young person to say or to believe, because most academics will tell you that civilization was born in Africa. So Africa was the birthplace of civilization, and that being the case, um, it should be absolutely intrinsic to any education, that civilization, the birth of civilization was in Africa, and it should follow, as part of that education, that we should learn about how civilization grew and how, we all came to be where we are, both in towns and cities and in rural areas. So it's quite shocking and quite sad, really. And I think it's something that, the education system is probably responsible for, but equally can be responsible for correcting.
Yes, well said, well said. And now you bring to my attention another issue. I'm sorry, I've got a slight echo. I'm trying to get this resolved today. Um, you now bring to my attention another issue of concern. Because you write that Britain, of course, is one of those nations we identify as being part of the problem. Uh, if you were a betting woman, he says,
Don't have enough money to bet. I'm an architect.
I hear you. I hear you. Would you see that there? Do you believe that there's possible for change within a reasonable period of time in terms of how they relate the history of Africa, both in the national curriculum or otherwise? 'Cause clearly, we want to get on to architecture at the moment, but fundamental to this is how we are perceived in the architectural world, which curiously has less than 1% architects from our community, which just seems crazy, completely crazy. But do you see, is there hope for the future, in the near future, do you believe?
Um, well, well, absolutely. I think really it's a question of, pointing out to, children and young people as they
Mhm.
visit, museums, that these artifacts are there, but they often go unnoticed. I mean, I think you mentioned earlier about the British Museum, for instance. The British Museum is absolutely packed
Yes,
with the riches from the continent, and
yes,
quite often people walk past those, um, amazing treasures to go somewhere else. So I would say the thing to do is to stop, is for the museum curators to be able to stop in front of those, that wealth, those treasures from Africa, and point them out, to as part of the curriculum. And it would be fantastic if it was included as a general part of the curriculum, because it would make so much difference to the confidence and, the yeah, to the confidence of children
mhm,
and young people
mhm,
of, African and Caribbean and diasporic, descent, to be able to feel included. They are already included, but that inclusion
yes,
goes unnoticed and unremarked, which is a loss to everybody. It's a loss
yes,
in particular to those young people and their families, but it's a loss to the general population, because if you're only, hearing half the history,
mhm,
then you're losing the wealth, your own wealth, the treasure of the whole nation. So the National Trust, for instance, lots and lots of people visit National Trust houses,
mhm,
is full of treasures from Africa, the Caribbean, India, the colonies as they were, and it's really just a question of, putting your specs on, you know,
yes,
and
yes,
and seeing what's there, because it is there, it does
yeah.
exist, but it goes unremarked and unnoticed and untreasured.
I, I've got a friend whose name shall remain anonymous for now, who has
Okay.
had the opportunity to go in and see some of the artifacts. I hadn't realized how big the British Museum is. Forget about the Belgium Museum, mind you, because it's even bigger. How big the British Museum is. And she reports that if I spent one day in those vaults, which, as I said, they extend their extensive vaults because they have artifacts going back hundreds of years. That I would leave the vaults feeling and believing that I'm a monarch. That's what she said. And this is obviously a European woman, white woman. I would feel as if I'm a monarch, and I'd be incredibly proud of our people's achievements. That's as much as she wanted to say. And she said that even saying that was too much, because I would get ideas in my head. And there you are, huh? I get ideas in my head of grandeur, that anything is possible. Anything is possible. People be a mind changer. Mm-hmm. So even till today, those families, the British authorities, refuse to give us access to our records. Mm-hmm. But it's important to have started off our interview with that as our backdrop, our context, because we now want to move on to the architectural profession. I pointed a stat earlier on.
Martin, before we do that, can I just recommend to your listeners a film which is available on YouTube, Idris Elba's film Gold. It's a fantastic film, and it's Idris Elba tracing the history of gold from ancient times to the present day. And there's a particularly interesting piece where he goes into the vaults of the Bank of England and looks at the amount of gold which is stored in the Bank of England.
Oh, wow.
And that is amazing, because there are just vast rooms full of gold bars, those which have come primarily from Africa and constitute the wealth of this country. Now, Britain is no longer on the gold standard. It came off the gold standard in the early 70s, I think 1971. But before that, gold was the marker for wealth. And in some ways, it still is. So have a look at that film. And I think people will understand that the wealth of this country and most of the Western cultures is founded on African treasure, and still is.
Wow. Again, I've heard you on this one. It's an interesting observation. I'm not sure if this situation can be changed in the near future, which is what I always like to do in these shows, is to give hope to others, that change is possible. Change is possible. And I realise that many British people, particularly those in the so-called upper classes, or the aristocrats, as it were, because their wealth is founded on the blood, so much blood and horror of others, they are somewhat hesitant to come forward to seek redemption, because we are remarkably forgiving people. Remarkably forgiving people. If it was the other way around, I suspect they would be quite so forgiving. You see, we're remarkably forgiving. I mentioned a moment ago with regards to Nigeria and the desire to find peace so we can create great wealth for all Nigerians. That's ultimately what we want for the entire world. And as I said, it does provide that context, and I will seek out that particular film, and I may well play, if I can, excerpts from it where I can. But yes, the gold standard was indeed Bretton Woods. The gold standard is recognised, and we recognise that Britain's wealth, and it's still happening, he says, is founded on African gold and other raw materials. I just use that word as well, other raw materials. But let me now move into the architectural profession. I'm interested in this profession because, of course, this profession provides, when you think of a people and you want to put an image, you have an image of that person, the peoples, then you have an image of their architecture. Um, and I would, before I go into the wider profession here in Britain and Europe, I want you, if you can, to begin to infer what is African architecture. Mhm. When we say that, what styles are we describing? Would you be able to articulate that for us in words that relatively straightforward for all the humble human beings like myself can understand? But it'd be useful to get a flavour, because if I were in China, I could articulate their architectural style. Okay? If I were in Russia, I could articulate their architectural style. Or India, yeah, you see their architectural style. What would be the architectural style that would be of a African, that would reflect an sort of African heritage? What would you describe it?
Well, I think that the first thing to say is that Africa constitutes 53, 57 countries.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is to emphasize the diversity of architecture on the
Yes.
continent. So, from north to south, architecture varies hugely. But for me, the emphasis would be on the sustainability of African architectures, um, and how it relates to the climate, because up until very recently, the African buildings, had to be um, long lasting,
Mm-hmm.
self sustaining,
Yes.
appropriate to the weather and the conditions. So it had to be self cooling, for
Yes.
instance.
Yes.
And those technologies were invented and applied in various ways across the continent, in the various different cultures. So the use of local materials, the use of earth, the use of um, thatch, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and the engineering that is evident when you look at African architecture. Those skills of architect architecture in terms of engineering
Mm-hmm.
and local skills, and the application of art to architecture is quite striking. And
Yes.
that's something that you'll see, whether you're talking about North Africa, all the way down to the Cape.
Right.
So I think those are strands which apply throughout the continent. And I wouldn't say there is an African architecture, but what I would say is that there are African architectures, and approach to engineering local conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and the combination of architecture and art as an integrated whole. So not making a separation between, this is architecture, this is art, but, art and architecture being combined as an integrated whole. And I think that's very important.
Fascinating as you describe this, and thank you for that description. First of all, you're reminding us, of course, we say African. Actually, Africa is made up of many peoples, many cultures, thousands of languages. So you're right. Okay, so that was a rather lazy description for me. Okay, would there be particular parts of the continent that, in terms of its architectural heritage, uh, there are distinctiveness to which you are able to teach others? Is it different from the southern part, eastern, western, northern? Is there particular styles that you could give light to help those who are listening to appreciate that diversity?
Well, I mean, I think, stick a pin in the map. and,
Yes. Okay. By the
and
map. Okay.
there are just so many interesting and special different types of architectures. So if we look at you start with the pyramids,
Hmm.
and the wealth of just saying the word, pyramid brings to mind the great treasures that were so-called discovered, unearthed, and taken away and held in various institutions. So starting with huge monuments, which must have taken efforts of hundreds and thousands of people, to the very smallest of domestic architectures. So, for instance, I would point to the work that's done by the Ndebele women,
Okay. Yes.
the Ndebele houses, which are just beautiful works of art. So they're not just domestic buildings, but they are also hugely beautiful treasures, which are worked on by the community. And I think perhaps that's something that is special about African architecture, is that the architectures are symbolic of the efforts of the communities. And quite often architecture, domestic architecture, is in the hands of the women in the communities.
Okay.
So they would make the houses, they would decorate the houses, and more importantly, I think they would maintain the houses.
Right.
Because, you know, if you have if you have challenges with the weather, you have to have a means of making sure that the houses, the buildings, are maintained on a regular basis.
Right.
So the maintenance regimes that are evident in the communities, particularly I would say in the Sahel, around the mosques in in sub-Saharan Africa around the Sahel have a built-in maintenance regime, if you like, so that if you look at the mosques, you'll see that the scaffolding is embedded in the structure of the buildings. So they're quite extraordinary buildings. They're really beautiful, and they have what look like spikes sticking out of the structure.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the reason for that is because they need to be maintained on a regular basis, and the spikes are actually scaffolding, which is embedded in the structure, so that when it rains or there are storms or there are challenges which happen in all areas of the world, you don't go through a process of having to invent a new form of maintenance. The maintenance is built into the engineering and the architecture of the building. And so I would suggest that people look at the mosques.
Okay.
If you just Google mosques in African mosques, you'll see some of the most beautiful buildings come up, and they've been there for thousands of years, a lot of them, and have been maintained over these years and kept in beautiful condition, because people have the forethought to design a system of maintenance into the engineering of the building.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, it is noted that there are certain religious buildings that have survived the Maafa. There's no doubt about that. Um, but far too many have been destroyed. Yep, far too many have been destroyed. And what you describe in terms of the different styles and different parts of the continent, I have noticed myself, being an amateur, I might add, being an amateur. I was about to impress you with my understanding, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to move on. But I will say this, though. I will say this: the use of materials, and you are right, so that the effects of construction is minimal on the wider environment. Yeah. So those principles of sustainability were a part of our cultural heritage thousands of years ago. Okay, and that's what you're alluding to, and I thank you for that. I thank you for that. Can I now move to Britain? And you're the founder members of the Association of Black Architects. That's right. Founder member?
Society of Black
Society. There
Architects.
you are. Get that right. Okay. Why did you form it? Why did you form that organisation first of all?
I suppose because it didn't exist,
Yes.
and there were so many. When I started my studies at the Architectural Association, there were so many talented young people from all parts of the world. I mean, it was
Yes.
a real privilege to be in an institution where you could suddenly meet people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from coming from all continents and all countries. Um, and at that time, the people that I met were so-called foreign students who were
Okay.
being subsidized by their governments. So the governments of the Caribbean, the governments in Africa would send their young people to train as architects, and then quite often after they finished their courses, they would go back
Yes.
to their original to help in the countries that were paying for their education. But there were, I thought, quite a small group of us who were so-called home students at that time. There were, I think, myself and Audley English were two home students and
Right.
the Architectural Association. And we were lucky enough to have grants from the Inner London Education Authority, if people remember that far back, ILEA. And so I thought that there were only a few of us, but then it became obvious that actually there were a large number of students from African and Caribbean, of African and Caribbean heritage, but we weren't. We might be training, but we certainly weren't progressing through the profession. And so Society of Black Architects was really formed as a sort of campaigning organisation, so that we could meet each other, talk to each other about the challenges that we faced, and try and help support each other as we made our way through what is an incredibly challenging profession. So the training is 7 years in total, and it's a very long time for a young person to dedicate their life to becoming a professional. So that was the reason for starting the Society of Black Architects. And it was really modelled on the Society of Black Lawyers, which you
Okay.
may know Peter Herbert
Yes. Yes.
and his colleagues had started. And my brother is a barrister and was a member of the Society of Black Lawyers. So that was an inspiration. And I have to give credit to Peter and that group for inspiring us to start the Society of Black Architects.
And if I may, on the society. So, as you as it once it was formed, uh, how did the rest of the profession react to it? Its very existence.
Well, I think the first thing was that there was an expectation that this was going to be, two or three young black folks getting together, and that and people just had to be the profession should be nice to us because there were only a few of us, and
I'm
um,
sorry, I shouldn't have
and
laughed. I'm sorry.
and actually on that first meeting, the first
Yeah.
meeting
Yes.
we had a founding group of about 10 of us, but the
Yes.
first proper meeting we had in Reba, I think there were about 90 people turned up. And, I think that was a shock to the architectural system, but it was a shock to me as well,
Oh wow.
because I hadn't expected and I hadn't realized how many young, black, talented people were in training to become architects.
Yes.
And so that was a great surprise. It was, yeah, no, it was really a really wonderful thing. And we set off on our journey, and we had for our patrons we had the Asantehene, the Otumfor, um, the king of Ashanti, and we had Richard Rogers, who later became Lord Rogers. So we had jointly two fantastic patrons. But it was a proper challenge,
Okay.
because it was a shock to the system. And I remember somebody saying that an architect who had been training in I think it was late 60s, early 70s, who'd been ejected from the building, 66 Portland Place, from the headquarters, because he'd gone there to make an inquiry, having qualified as an architect. And he
Right.
was thrown out of the building because people didn't realize that black architects existed.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
that was a huge turnaround from, being ejected from a building to 90 odd people suddenly turning up, and all these grey-haired, mustachioed old white geezers on the walls must have had a proper shock.
Okay. Thank you. That's a sort of, that description is not unfamiliar in other professions, of course. I know you. I think you've alluded to it, but maybe you can give me two or three examples of change as a result of the existence of the association, the society. What change have you been the carrying call for? What changes we sought to achieve within the profession?
I think what Sober did was to register the presence of black architects in the profession. And in some ways, things haven't changed all that much. Because, as you said yourself, the statistics show that there are 1% of qualified architects are from African Caribbean heritage. Not just that, but
Mm,
people of color, I would say, are in incredibly short supply.
yes,
And there is
yes.
a method, a sort of gatekeeping method, which effectively ensures that of the 90 of every 100 students that start in architecture, enthusiastic, talented, bright young people, only one or two get through the course. So there's a huge attrition rate in the course, and it's sort of built in so that as you go through it, it's people probably know that over the 7 years, it
Mm.
starts off with a degree, the equivalent of a degree for the first 3 years, and then
Forgive me, Osei, for interrupting.
yeah,
Forgive me, Osei, for interrupting. Just to make sure, you said it. You said there's an attrition, and only 1% gets through. Okay.
yeah,
Now, generally, I would say at that point, well, we have the Equalities Act,
yeah.
and such behaviour is clearly illegal. Um, that figure is so incredibly low, and therefore the evidence of bias must be in abundance. I imagine most of these big firms are now subject to cases. I would imagine, or not? Mm.
Well, I think they probably are, but the thing about cases is that you may have a case, you may take a case, you may be successful with a case, but then you are a part of that would be, as people may be aware, that if you're successful and your case is settled, you're usually under a non-disclosure agreement. So
Mhm.
effectively, success equals silence.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Well,
so
yep, I get it.
if you take the case of Stephen Lawrence, and Stephen was a talented young man who wanted to be an architect, and part of what we've learnt through the tireless work of Baroness Lawrence is that systemic racism exists in all areas of society. Well, that systemic racism exists in architecture as much as it does elsewhere. And the way it registers is in the statistics.
Yes. Yes.
And REBA itself and the ARB, which is the organization that keeps the statistics, have verified that there is a 1% success rate for architects. So it's a huge waste of talent. It's a huge
Mhm.
waste of the lives of
Yes, it
these
is.
incredibly talented young people. and it's a loss to not just to our communities, but to society as a whole, because there is just, as we've said, with cities and civilization and the location of the origins of civilization, there is so much talent and wealth of knowledge and resource built into our communities that
Yes.
is inevitably being lost because there is a systemic attrition rate in architecture.
I'm almost speechless. I used to encounter this. I'm just trying to adjust my volumes. I used to encounter this situation in the education sector. It was never quite simply, well, I say that, no, that would be not quite accurate, but I encountered similar situations in the education sector. Okay, there's no doubt about that. The fact that they persist and continue to persist so violently, I'm going to use that word, violently, in this sector is extremely disturbing. Um, if you were the president of the RIBA, or indeed, and its allied professional bodies, what changes would you want to see made in the profession so that this truly horrifying outcome no longer taints the good name of the architectural sector? What change would you want to have? Maybe give us two or three changes that you think would be effective.
Well, I would look at it. I think it's a question of gatekeeping.
Okay.
So the gatekeepers are, generally speaking, middle-aged or elderly white blokes, um, and um, and they tend to trust
Yes.
other people who are like them.
Hmm.
So the system of gatekeeping is really established to make sure that um, people who enter the hallowed halls, the portals, look like the gatekeepers and have the same culture. And I mean, it would be if, for instance, the whole of the fashion industry only accepted old elderly white men,
Yes. Yes.
and they all designed clothes that only fitted elderly white men, and everybody else had to put up with it. That's what you've got in architecture. So you've got a culture which is designing for middle-aged people of a monoculture.
Yes.
And if you look at the statistics, you will see that, particularly in domestic buildings, most domestic buildings are places of work, of life for families. But they are not designed by women. They're not designed with the participation of children and elders. They are designed, by and large, by middle-aged, middle-class white men who
Hmm.
probably use domestic buildings least, but profit the most.
Yes.
So there's an inequity there, which is very, very challenging. And I have no idea, because I've been trying to do this for the last 50 odd years of my life, how you change that. And change
Yes.
is exceedingly slow, partly because there is so much money to be made from architecture
Yes.
and people who make money from architecture. So I mean, let's take Southwark for instance, since we are
Southwark in
um,
London. Okay.
Southwark in London. Okay,
Mhm.
so I think the population of Southwark is incredibly diverse,
Yes.
and you'll know this, but what is the African population, African Caribbean population in Southwark?
Yes. Combined, it's 47%, 48%.
47%.
Yes.
And would you say that the buildings in Southwark are designed by 47%? That 47% of people who design and build housing in Southwark are from the relevant populations that we're talking about, African, Caribbean, people of colour. that are diverse populations.
As many of you know, I'm a politician. Typically, I wouldn't answer a question directly. On this occasion, I will. No, that is not the case. There you are.
Yes, but you see, if we have a situation where 47% of the population, of any population, let's take it away from Southern, any population are engaged in an activity which is controlled by 1%
Yeah.
of the population, there is a clear inequity there,
Yes.
which has to be systemic. And I would say it's really, everybody votes, everybody pays their taxes, and people are entitled to receive services which match their contribution.
We
And
agree.
clearly that is not the case. And originally when I worked in Solon South East in Peckham, it was noticeable that the worst housing went to people in terms of their, not just their race background, but their class background as well. So there's a huge inequity there, which has to be addressed. And I think that is a political matter. I mean, architects can help, but the way that the system works is that the people who control the purse strings decide how these things work. So it's hugely frustrating. And we're talking about children and young people who we found earlier, I think it was last year, that there was a young child who died in a flat which was completely ridden with mold. And how that affects your life, not just your life, but your life chances.
It does.
So there is a startling statistic of people who die from living in poor housing conditions, but there are people also whose life chances are affected. And to me, architecture and the diversity of architecture represents an opportunity and a resource which is being lost. So, let's get those doors open and let those talented young people in. And there are people in power, like your good self, who can keep those doors open for long enough for people to come in and show what is possible and what people can do.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to say I'm able to make that determination, mind you, but I'm not going to disagree with you on the powers of local authorities, planning authorities, to influence your sector at a local level. I suspect it would require some primary legislation to enshrine in law our rights to set standards. We most certainly are able to set standards as regards employment. Okay? On particular projects, a percentage must be sort of local people and so on. Okay, we're not yet able, and we most certainly are able to set standards in regards to compliance with our equal opportunities policies. Okay, another aspect of our that's enshrined in primary legislation. But in choosing an architectural firm, and determining whether or not they themselves, that firm, has really complied with the primary legislation in terms of providing employment opportunities. You can demonstrate the reasons why less than 1% of employees is because those diverse employees are not presenting themselves, and therefore they're not able to gain access for employment. Okay? Unless they can demonstrate that they've gone through that process and they've not discriminated, it is a challenging one. And I suppose I'm rambling because, of course, I know there are others who are listening who most certainly have the powers to intervene. Okay? And what I suppose people like us require is people like yourself to provide that substantive advice as to which of the mechanisms we should use to compel the architectural firms out there, and you're right, they're incredibly rich firms, to provide and comply with primary legislation. prevent access to employment of people of diverse backgrounds, okay, simply because they're of diverse backgrounds. It has to be for other reasons why a person gains employment. In other words, it's a merit, in other words. Um, it's an interesting one, and one worthy of exploration. I'm convinced that the Royal Institute of British Architects requires a review. Okay, I'm also convinced that much of the sector has been operating as a almost a little club, closed environment. Okay, and it's ripe for review. Okay? And I hope that my other colleagues in other places hear what you said, okay, and respond appropriately. Because you're right, the loss to the nation is incalculable. The enormous talent that has been lost because 1% continues to hold the positions of influence. Change is necessary. Can I just move you on in that case, if I may, Elsie, to your work in Africa? I've seen some excellent examples of your work. In fact, forgive me, before I go to Africa, I know there were a number of your works here in London. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes to tell us a little bit about your work. For example, Green Park Station, for example, the Supreme Court, for example. Just give us a flavour of some of your work here in London, or maybe other cities of the country, because we are a nationwide show. I know. But you really give us a flavour so that those who aspire to be architects can go visit and see examples of your works here in London or here in Britain. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just preface that by saying that architecture is a team sport.
Yes.
I'm in my role is really in leadership in team leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So the teams that I have led projects include the Supreme Court in Parliament Square. Now, people who've watched all the debates, the prorogation debates, when Boris Johnson and his friends decided to prorogue Parliament,
Oh,
the
yes.
whole Brexit debate, are used to looking at the Supreme Court, used to looking at that bench of learned justices
Mm-hmm.
sitting on the highest cases in the land. So
Mm-hmm.
those rooms were designed by myself and my teams.
Right. Okay.
And it was a huge team. I mean, engineers, architects, artists. We had some fantastic artists who
Wow.
designed everything from the furniture to the carpets. The whole building, which used to be a court, a crown court,
Yes.
was stripped out and reconstituted as the Supreme Court. So we were an incredibly diverse team. I was very proud of the young architects. There was a young architect, Chipiwa Matawanyika, from Zimbabwe, Evan Larby, who was a young Ghanaian who became a planner, just to name but two. So every time you look at that room
Okay.
with the justices, the highest justices in the land, remember that it was designed by a diverse team. So next time a young person says, how have Africans been involved in architecture, point at the Supreme Court and
Okay.
start there.
A
So,
question. This
yeah.
might be a little naughty, I know. If we were to go into that building or into the room, would we see any aspect of a traditional African style in that room? I know you may not be allowed to do it, but did you sneak an aspect in?
Well, I
Just between
think
us, just between us.
from what we were saying before, the whole thing about African architecture is the community and collective aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So you don't have, the hero architect, as some people may know from the Fountainhead. The hero architect who is the person who decides everything. It was a collective effort, and the fact that those rooms are inclusive in the sense that when one of the things we did was to make sure that if you were elderly in a wheelchair and
Mhm.
needed to move around those rooms, you would be able to do so with ease. Now, it's not something that people immediately think, oh, this room is wheelchair compliant. But there is an ease there, there's a comfort there,
Yes.
knowing that, and people with disabilities aren't necessarily people in wheelchairs, there's all sorts of disabilities.
Yes.
But to have that and in your mind as you're designing, because architecture is a process of imagination as well,
Okay.
to imagine that space being used by all sorts of people from all sorts of cultures, and not just able-bodied, so-called able-bodied fit
I
young
understand.
people. So I hope that's an answer.
Green Park Station, I believe, is one of yours.
Yeah.
Tell us more about Green Park Station.
Oh well, Green Park Station is an absolute marvel. I mean, it was. We were taken on by Transport for London, and this was part of the Olympics 2012. Because the thing about 2012 Olympics is that there was a requirement that some of the stations, at least, should be wheelchair accessible. Not just wheelchair accessible, but accessible to everybody. And Green Park Station is so central to the network that was one of the ones that was selected to be an accessible station. So that was a brief that we were given. But if people remember, Green Park Station used to be that, when you came out of Green Park Station, you were straight into Piccadilly. And it was incredibly busy and very difficult to find your way around. So what we did was we turned the station into the park. So the station is now part of the park. So you come out of the station,
Yes.
and you're into the green of Green Parks,
Yes.
Green Park.
Yes.
And you are into somewhere where, if you have children, the children can play in the park.
Correct.
You can make your way around. You can choose where you want to go, instead of being forced into the maelstrom of central London.
Indeed.
And I think that to me was a great achievement, because we started off with a transport project and ended up with opening the park up to the community and adding the value of landscape and community and access to, you can come out of Green Park Station and walk all the way to, if you feel like it, towards Buckingham Palace.
Yes, you can.
Without
Yes.
having to encounter the traffic.
Yes.
So, and that to me, that's really transformed that part of central London into something which is a treasure for the public.
I 100% agree. And as part of my diligence, I was there yesterday.
Oh, right, okay.
And it's a curious thing. It's I've got children, and when a child performs well, parent, you feel this incredible sense of pride and confidence. Oh wow, my son did it, my daughter did this, my nephew and niece did this. Oh, I had the same feeling. I thought, oh, this is Elsie's work. This is her guidance. Her input is here. And I felt a sense of elation, incredible elation. Thank you. Thank you. But I'm rather mature in age. I don't often feel that way. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going back to that young person who you mentioned, I think it's not just cities in Africa, but it's, to be able for that young person to go to Green Park Station and to know that there was a diverse team that was responsible for this beautiful space, transforming this beautiful space, or to go to the Supreme Court, which is a public building, and to be able to sit in the audience and listen to cases, and maybe become a lawyer as a result of it. I think all these things may not be architects getting commissions, but they're architects affecting people's lives in a very important
Thank you
way.
for that. Thank you. Can I now just move to Africa and your commissioned work in Africa? I've seen works in Ghana and Nigeria. I'll let you choose which of those you wish to give light to.
Well, I think the one that is, if you like, traditionally architectural,
Mhm.
is the project that I've been working on with the great Nigerian artist Yinka Shonibare.
Oh yes, oh
Um,
yes.
and that again, as a member of a team. So Yinka lives primarily in the UK, and wanted a space in Nigeria. He was born in the UK, but his parents were originally from Nigeria. And he wanted a space where he could develop his relationship with African culture and African
Hmm.
art, and also promote the talent of young people on the continent. So his project, Guest Artist Space, which is in Lagos, in Lekki,
Right.
was a project that I worked on with my team in London with Yinka, and an international team in Nigeria. And that project has now been finished,
Yes.
and is part of the vibrant Lagos art scene.
Wow.
Um,
It, it,
and
yeah.
also, I'm proud to say, a prototype which we did for the screen
Mhm.
for Yinka's house, Yinka's project, was accepted by the Royal Academy of Arts in London to go
Great.
into their collection.
Wow.
So that's been really fantastic. And I think what we learn from that is that the talent of architecture, particularly young architects, who are so proficient in technology, in the use of technology in architecture, is just fantastic. Because
Yes. Yes.
our
Uh-huh.
team was working across UK, Italy, China, Nigeria, and the team was working together in a really integrated, fantastic way, which ended up with a building which people can work in, live in, enjoy.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic.
It is interesting. As I looked through the pictures, in fact, if I thought about it, I would put some of these pictures on screen for others to appreciate. I might attempt that in a moment. Um,
Okay.
I'm always looking for, of course, the African influence, the style. Because, of course, as I said earlier on, if you think of a people, you first of all think of either their their principal leader, usually a monarch or whatever. Then you might look at their artistic style, okay, or indeed their architecture, being the signifier. Here in Britain, we can see the various styles over the ages, usually associated with a monarch. And that's what I'm looking for. So it's easier for um, amateurs like myself to appreciate the works. And I looked at some of the works that you produced there, and I could sense a African spirit, he says. Can I use that word? An African spirit is embedded in there. And it'd been interested to encourage the architects from right across the continent to come together and to think about this issue of style. What gives us a distinctive look and feel? Okay, sustainability is important. The materials used, I know that's incredibly important. Okay, but that style I'm looking for. So I've used comparisons with Chinese, Japanese, Russian, Indian, and so on. We are, of course, a great people, and destiny is greatness. We most certainly have that style, and I suspect the detailed record, is kept in the British, Belgium, French, Italian, Spanish museums, of course. Okay, and it'd be found there. But most certainly, I'm interested in what is the style. I suppose my last question on the international theme, and then we'll almost to a close, is the future. What future for architecture for African peoples, either in Europe, the Americas, or Africa? How do you see it evolving over the coming years and decades? What do you see will be the real change that might happen within the sector?
Um, Gosh. Well, if I had a crystal ball for
Well, you're better placed than we are to
yes.
begin to envisage
Well,
a
I
future.
mean, I think the principal concern would be how we come to terms with the effects of climate change.
Okay. Yes.
So if we take, for instance, some of the locations, some of the smaller islands in around the Indian Ocean,
Yes. And the
which
Caribbean.
are
Yes.
which are low-lying
Yes.
land masses,
Hmm.
which could, with climate change and climate variability, disappear in the twinkling of an eye.
Yes.
And to me, the interesting response to that challenge
Hmm.
is how African countries and the continent has so many talented, skilled engineers.
Hmm.
Well, let's leave architects to one side, but the engineering profession in Africa has just been stupendous in its response
Right.
to climate change.
Yes.
So not just retaining those civilizations, because those civilizations could be inundated.
Hmm.
So to preserve those civilizations, but
Yes.
also that architects and architecture and engineering can and should be providing for a continent in terms of homes, in terms of food security, is very important. So
Absolutely.
that
Yes.
combination of architecture and agriculture, I think, is going to be really, really important. So I think over the next few years, what we're going to be seeing is the multiplicity of skills and how those skills integrate with
Hmm.
each other.
Hmm.
And coming back to gold, the wealth of Africa, is how we retain our knowledge and our use of gold, and the fact that the gold industry, the small scale gold industry,
Yes.
is potentially the source of wealth, but
Yes.
also
Yes.
the industrial processes can contaminate the landscape. So for African engineers, architects, agronomists to be gaining the treasure of gold,
Hmm.
as well as protecting the landscape, protecting the forests, protecting the rivers. I
Very
think
good.
that is a very, very serious challenge
Very
for the
good.
continent.
Very good. Very good. And lastly, despite all what we said, there are young, precocious minds watching
Mm.
us. Okay. Would you recommend that they pursue their careers in architecture?
Yes,
Why?
definitely.
Why?
Because so in my 70 and 10, I've come to the conclusion that even though it's very challenging, it is such a rewarding career. But not just rewarding for the individual, but rewarding for the communities in which those individuals reside and to which they contribute. So, yes, please do, and have a look at the film. I think you've got a link that of my talking to a young person
Hmm.
on the BBC
Yes.
education
Yes.
channel about who was already determined to become an architect.
Yes.
But I think it's incumbent on us elderly folk to create a congenial atmosphere and keep those doors open. You know,
Well said.
those of us who can become gatekeepers
Indeed.
do become a gatekeeper.
Yes.
And as Jack Lemmon once said, send the escalator down. Send the escalator down and bring other people back up. Don't just get to the top and rest on your laurels. Do the hard work of sending the escalator back down, to support people who have talent and want to create opportunities for others.
And lastly, if someone wanted to make contact with you, what's the best method to make contact with yourself? Do you have an email address, a public telephone number, a website? Give us an option.
Well, they can send me an email
Okay.
via elsieowusu.architectsuk@gmail.com.
Oh, please say that again, much slower. Yes.
Okay. Elsie Owusu, that's my name,
Yep.
dot
Yes.
architects UK
UK.
at gmail.com.
Okay, that's elsie.owusu.architect@gmail.com.
Architects UK
Oh,
at
Architects
gmail.com.
UK. That's right. I'll say it again. That's elsie.owusu.architectsuk@gmail.com. I'll put it in the caption. I'll put it in the
Okay.
caption on YouTube and Facebook so you can see the link. Okay, so you can
And
contact
just
Elsie.
remind people that the Royal Academy show is on until the 18th, which is next Sunday,
All right.
and a diverse audience is very, very welcome. I've got 6 exhibits in the show. And
Good.
you did forget to mention that I was the first female architect to be elected as a Royal Academician.
Oh, wow.
Which is,
Thank you. Well done. I know that was not easy.
and also, if you would, we have a GoFundMe appeal
Okay.
for Just Ghana, and we're supporting lots and lots of children with architecture, with interest in architecture, arts, and sustainability. So do go to our GoFundMe page and contribute ever so small amounts. £5, £10 would be very, very welcome.
Well said. Well said. And I'll include those details in the commentary on the YouTube and Facebook channels. So those of you who are interested, please give generously. Elsie, our time is up now. It has been
Okay.
truly fascinating. I feel as if I've only touched, he says, 1% of the questions I want to put to you, but it was always going to happen that way. I think we need to get you back. It was, 3 or 4 years ago, last time you were here. So
Yes,
far
that's
too
right.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think next time what we want to do is really look at the intricacies of the profession. Okay, how a young person should navigate the intricacies of the profession. We need to give them that advice, I think. But you are truly an inspiration. There are, just like the future president of the United States of America, in your
Oh, yes.
resume, there
Wonderful.
are a
Yes.
series of firsts. Yeah, you've opened those doors for others to follow. You are a remarkable human being. And we all love you. I want to say that without a shadow of a doubt. We all love you, and we hope the very best of you all times. Thank you for all the work that you have completed. Thank you, and I know
Well,
there's still
thank
much
you
more to
so
come.
much. It's been a great pleasure. See you again soon.
Very well. Okay. Until the next time, I remain the motivator. Thank you, Elsie. Good day to you. Good day to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Gosh, isn't she something else? Oh, wow. Inspirational, huh? Absolutely inspirational. And I want to encourage you who are interested in entering that profession, seek out the advice of Elsie Owusu. She's displayed that natural determination that's an inherent part of who we are as a community. She displays that courage, that verve, that incredible intelligence, emotional intelligence, yeah, to survive hostile environment and continue to thrive. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I want you all now to watch my intro video because I put much of what we've discussed in context. There's information is being shared with you. I know you will find beneficial, but if in doubt, seek out information. Seek it out. Contact Elsie. And those of you who feel that the contents that we provide today and in previous podcasts are to your satisfaction, please don't hesitate. Subscribe or give us the thumbs up before you leave, or leave a commentary if you're on YouTube or Facebook. really just give us some feedback. But please subscribe, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on the YouTube. Okay, leave a comment. Okay, and send the link to your family and friends so that we can spread the words. The whole purpose of these shows is to inform and to encourage activity, action from you. And through those actions, we all make the difference. So I say to you, this is the motivator. This is where we translate our words into action and where success is ours for the taking. The Motivator Show. The internet's most inspirational podcast. Every Saturday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. African style architecture. African style architecture. The great Ma'afa, the great tragedy. The key Swahili word for great disaster or great tragedy is a term used to refer to the centuries-long enslavement and murder of millions of Africans by white European nations, including Britain, Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the United States of America, and others. The theft of African artifacts, manuscripts, the destruction of sacred buildings, whole cities and villages, and their lasting impact on African peoples and the descendants of those who were enslaved. African style architecture. The Ma'afa, the great tragedy. The ancient port city in Eritrea. The ancient Asumite port of Adonis in Eritrea Red Sea coast was identified by a team of Eritrean archaeologists. The remains of numerous stone structures in a typical Asumite style dating to the 600 AD were buried under the desert stand. Hand axes unearthed in Kenya are the oldest advanced stone tools ever found. Africans were wielding sophisticated stone tools at least 300,000 years earlier than thought. African style architecture. The Ma'afa, the great tragedy. Abydos in Egypt. The remains of a 5,000-old city, including cemetery and several houses, have been unearthed in the state of Abydos in Egypt. The remains of buildings made of mud bricks and organic materials that are now mostly decayed, along with pottery, stone tools found inside the structures. In addition, a cemetery holding at least 15 burials was found near the city. Great Zimbabwe, Great Enclosure, is the largest and one of the most impressive, but hundreds of mortarless stone structures dotted around the region, extending hundreds of miles. The medieval capital city of the empire from 350 to 1700 AD, the name Zimbabwe in Shona is said to mean houses of stones. African style architecture. The renaissance of traditional African architecture. The dying African architectural heritage is a social cultural emergency, as traditional architecture remains an indispensable aspect of our history, our cultural heritage, defining who we are. while some states like Mali, Sudan, and Niger Republic have done better than most in the preservation and propagation of indigenous architecture, many countries have no stated policies. This must change. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. Elsie Owusu, OBE, specialist conservation architect, principal of Elsie Owusu Architects, with projects in UK, Nigeria and Ghana, founder and first chair of the Society of Black Architects, first African woman elected to the Royal Society of Arts. She is a trustee of the UK Supreme Court Art Trust, former member of the Royal Institute of British Architects, and Women for Africa Award winner in 2017. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture by Elsie Owusu. Works include Riverside View, Cardew Atlee Potteries, Master Plan for Crafts Workshops in View in Ghana, Ramp and Library Section, Guest Artist Space, Art Complex for Yinka Shonibere in Lagos, Nigeria, Swimming Pool and Studios second floor details in Lagos, Nigeria, UK Supreme Court Courtroom 1 design by Elsie Owusu. African-style architecture, the renaissance of traditional African architecture. The revival of indigenous African architecture has to start with compulsory introduction of traditional architecture into architectural school curriculums, its history, design theory, and construction methodology. New works by contemporary African architects such as Elsie Owusu and designers have demonstrated the vast potential of traditional African architecture when combined with modern designs, materials, and construction techniques. The Motivator Show. Success is ours for the taking. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. Press the like button and don't forget to leave a comment. Follow us on Facebook. Give us the thumbs up and share with your family and friends. We are also on Instagram and TikTok. Follow us there too. You can listen to us on galaxy@fui.net and also Mixcloud too.